So it's interesting because we have these debates about terms like structural racism, right? But if you look at this, I mean, it kind of makes sense from a libertarian perspective, because what you're seeing is that it's not just you and me not liking each other, right? It's actually cascades of laws from the federal to the state to the municipal level that are being forced on people so that they are not allowed to live next to each other. They're not allowed to go to the same shops.
Yeah.
It's not just the shop owner, right? It's the town or the state forcing that outcome. And you actually have these amazing cases of private businesses trying really hard and suing to get out of these requirements because, of course, they're very expensive and they alienate their black customers, right? And so they're trying to sue in order to say, you can't force these costs on us that of segregation.
Yeah.
And so you do see a little bit of that market pushback against all of this, but you see how much the racist structure was imposed through law.
Right. And that's to channel my old professor, Walter Williams, in The State Against Blacks. His whole point is it's the collusion of racist sentiments with the power of the state that ultimately creates these, and yes, you can call it structural racism, but it happens through government.
Yes.
Right.
Structural racism is not sustainable unless you have a monopoly on force that makes it hard to break up.
Yeah, and I think one of the most egregious examples is, of course, the FHA loans they would not grant loans to Black Americans by and large because they wanted quote unquote homogenous neighborhoods, right?
Yeah.
And so as a result, you have places like that you wouldn't even think. And then once again, this is Rothstein's book. Going in Oakland, right? We see segregation emerge in a place that you would think, okay, the South is where segregation. No, like many of our cities were segregated because of the disparate, sort of the disparate ability of Black Americans to get access to bank loans in order to buy houses because they wouldn't insure, the FHA wouldn't insure the loans. And so I think, of course, then Rothstein's like, well, the answer is massive government intervention at the end of his book. And we're like, no, stop. Like government created the problem, right? We need to acknowledge this as libertarians and as classical liberals. And I think that it's really, really important for our progressive friends to recognize that as well, because we just recently had debates about, we're having a debate about what gun laws need to be enacted. And one of the things I always caution my progressive friends about is like, you understand that oftentimes when you pass legislation and regulations like this, it's ultimately going to disparately be enforced, right, upon Black Americans. And so we have to be really, really cautious about new legislation, new programs, etc. that we implement because it can have a disparate effect for whatever reason.
I was picking on AOC earlier, but you may have noticed a couple days ago she actually said exactly that. This sounds good, but the implementation of this is going to target people of color because that's just how it is.
Yeah, and I think one of the most interesting things in the book is, you absolutely have these projects that have racist intent, but then you kind of shift, right, over time in the 20th century to projects that have good intent, but they still have terrible outcomes, right? Like these gun control laws. Many of the people who are interested in these are not trying to send more Black men to prison, but that is what will happen. And you see the same thing with the Great Society, the welfare state. You see the same thing with the way that the unions control.
But even like gun control's origins
are racial.
Very racist.
Yeah, they're racial.
Yeah, we have a whole section on gun control in the book.
Yeah.
Actually, all of the original gun control laws are anti-Black specifically. White men were actually encouraged to have guns, right? Particularly during the Revolution, they were required to have guns.
Yeah.
But you see a series of gun control laws throughout our history, and they are always anti-Black, including the ones in the 20th century. So the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, right, is patrolling their neighborhoods because they don't trust the police with guns. People freak out about it. They march into the Capitol with their guns. They don't do anything. They're just holding them. But that freaks people out badly enough that we start passing gun control laws.